Nico was never born, unless you count coffin birth. After Shanann Watts was murdered and placed in a shallow grave, her body expelled baby boy Nico. This raised the first red flag of alarm.
Calling because I'm concerned about a friend of mine. I dropped her off at her house at 2 in the morning last night because we were out of town together and we were on the way back from the airport, and she was having issues and she's pregnant, and I haven't been able to get a hold of her this morning, and I've gone to her house and her car's there and stuff like that, but she won't answer the door, she won't answer phone calls, she won't answer text messages. And I'm just really, really concerned. And she had a doctor's appointment this morning, and she didn't go to it. And I don't know what to do. I've called him and talked to him, and he said that she went on a play date with her other 2 daughters. But, like, if she went on a play date, they're both in car seats. Why would she not take her car?
Shanann's friend rightfully disturbed. You know, that's called routine evidence, not stereotypical or normal evidence, evidence of a routine. Why would Shanann take her children on play dates with their car seats still in the back of her car? Shanann would never have done that. What more do we know? Listen.
Pregnant Shanann Watts sets off again for a work trip with close friend Nicole Atkinson. Shanann confided her marriage has been strained, but she's hopeful to reconcile when she returns. The pair's flight is delayed, and Atkinson drops Shanann off at home just before 2 a.m. Monday. Shanann has a 9 a.m. doctor's appointment, but the expectant mom misses it. Watts says Shanann told him she was taking the girls to a play date when he left for work at 5:15, but he has no idea where Shanann or their children are.
Well, what about that missed doctor's appointment? Shanann pregnant with baby Nico at the time, so rightfully and SOP, standard operating procedure, they speak to Chris Watts, the husband.
Any friends she was...
The story of Chris Watts does not begin with violence, but with a man who carefully hid the darkest parts of himself behind a smile that fooled almost everyone who knew him. In the quiet suburbs of Colorado, neighbors described the Watts family as picture-perfect. Chris appeared gentle, soft-spoken, and endlessly patient. Shannan, full of energy and drive, shared her life openly online, hoping that the world would see what she believed she had: love, stability, and a future worth building. But behind closed doors, a different reality was forming, a secret slowly rotting the foundation of their marriage. Chris had begun an affair with a coworker, and with it came a fantasy of a new life, one unburdened by responsibility. Instead of facing his mistakes, he created a narrative where he was the victim, trapped and misunderstood. And like many who refuse accountability, he shifted blame to the person who least deserved it, his wife. He claimed Shannan wasn't enough anymore, that she wasn't the woman he wanted her to be. In reality, she had simply stopped fitting into the fantasy he had built around his affair. Friends later said Chris began to emotionally detach, speaking less, withdrawing, and acting strangely polite, as if rehearsing a role. Shannan, sensing the shift, tried to save her marriage, unaware that Chris had already rewritten the story in his mind. A story where she became the obstacle. A story where, chillingly, he saw himself as the protagonist. If this unfolding darkness already sends chills down your spine, don't forget to like this video, it helps us bring more hidden truths to light. As summer crept in, the tension between Chris and Shannan grew thicker, though she still had hope. She believed their problems were solvable, the way most marital issues are, with communication, honesty, effort. But Chris had already crossed an emotional threshold that he refused to walk back from. He began blaming Shannan for things that made little sense, accusing her of being controlling, of changing, of not being the ideal wife he wanted. In reality, he was projecting his guilt, using her as a shield to protect the fragile lie he was constructing. During this period, Shannan traveled to visit family, leaving Chris with time alone, time he used not for reflection, but for indulgence. He deepened the affair, took his mistress out, and pretended he was already living a new life. He told her that his marriage was over, painting himself as a mistreated husband desperate to escape. Meanwhile, Shannan was texting him, confused by his cold replies, hoping things would warm up when she returned. If you want more stories that expose what people hide behind their smiles, share this video. You never know who might need to hear it. Neighbors noticed subtle differences. Chris, once shy, began working out excessively, buying new clothes, and acting more confident. Shannan felt the distance but didn't know its cause. When her friend urged her to be careful, she brushed it off, believing Chris was simply stressed. What she didn't know was that Chris was telling his mistress that Shannan was the problem, that she didn't support him, wasn't exciting enough, wasn't the kind of partner he believed he deserved. He pushed every flaw onto her, twisting her vibrant personality into something negative in his mind. Still, Shannan held on to hope that would tragically blind her to the danger already at her doorstep. When Shannan returned home from her trip, she walked into a house colder than she remembered. Chris hugged her, but it felt distant, rehearsed. He had been practicing emotional separation for weeks, preparing himself for a future without her, even though he refused to confront her honestly. Shannan, despite her intuition screaming that something was wrong, still tried to reconnect. She planned counseling, drafted messages to him, wrote heartfelt texts. But every attempt was met with silence or irritation. Chris claimed she nagged, that she pressured him, and again, he used these excuses to justify drifting deeper into the arms of his affair. On the night that would become the turning point, Shannan returned home late from a work trip. Friends dropped her off, unaware it would be the last time they'd see her alive. She walked inside, exhausted but hopeful, planning to talk things through. Chris later told investigators he blamed Shannan for changing, insisting she didn't meet his emotional or physical expectations anymore. But in truth, Chris had changed, his desires shaped by fantasy, not reality. The image of the new life he wanted became stronger than the real life he had. And in his twisted mindset, he believed removing Shannan would free him. Meanwhile, Shannan had shared her fears with her best friend, who stayed alert when she stopped responding to messages the next morning. The friend didn't know it yet, but her concern would become crucial in uncovering what happened. By the next morning, Shannan's friend grew worried when she couldn't reach her. She knew something was wrong. Shannan never ignored messages, especially with the kids. She contacted police for a welfare check, unknowingly setting in motion the unraveling of Chris's carefully constructed lies. When officers arrived, Chris acted calm, too calm, walking through the house with a stiffness that felt unnatural. He talked about Shannan as if she were simply gone, as if her disappearance was just inconvenient rather than alarming. The officers sensed the strange disconnect, and neighbors noticed too. As the cameras rolled, Chris appeared emotionless, something viewers across the world would later find deeply unsettling. If stories like this make you wonder how well you know the people around you, share this video so others can join the investigation unfolding right now. Chris's first lie was that Shannan left with the kids. His second lie was that they had an emotional conversation where she just disappeared. And when police pressed deeper, he blamed their marital struggles entirely on her. He claimed she suffocated him emotionally, that she wasn't the woman she used to be, painting himself once again as the victim. In reality, these excuses were designed to shield him from guilt, to make his decisions seem justified. But what Chris didn't anticipate was how quickly holes would appear. Shannan's friend refused to accept his version. Her intuition, her persistence, and her refusal to stay silent forced investigators to look closer. And with every hour that passed, Chris's mask slipped further. As investigators continued questioning, Chris's facade cracked under the weight of his own lies. He failed the polygraph test, spectacularly, and the agents called him out immediately. They told him what the world would soon know: he wasn't being honest. Cornered, Chris tried one final, desperate tactic. He attempted to blame Shannan for the unthinkable, claiming she was responsible for harming their children. It was a horrifying accusation, one that investigators instantly recognized as another attempt to shift blame onto the woman he had systematically devalued for months. If this moment leaves you stunned, take a second to like this video. It helps keep real stories from being buried. In his confession, Chris twisted facts, emotions, and motives to portray himself once more as reacting rather than acting. He wanted the world to believe Shannan was the problem, that she pushed him away, that she wasn't enough for him anymore. But investigators, friends, family, and the public saw through it. They knew Shannan was a loving mother, a devoted partner, and someone who tried to save a marriage Chris had already abandoned. His blame shifting, his attempts to rewrite reality, became evidence of his manipulative mindset. As the truth emerged, the world watched in disbelief. The case became a chilling reminder that evil often hides behind ordinary faces, behind polite smiles, behind people who seem incapable of darkness until the moment it's too late. Chris Watts became one of the most disturbing examples of a man who valued his fantasy more than his family. And while justice was served, the scars left behind can never be undone. If this story shook you, make sure to subscribe to Grave Secret for more real-life cases where the truth fights to be heard. And share this video with someone who follows true crime, because remembering these victims ensures their stories never fade.